Hello, welcome back. So we are on chapter 24 of Edward Tulane, and we've got about 4 chapters to go. If you remember, Edward was smashed by Neil, who was the owner of the diner, because Bryce couldn't pay his bill. And so Bryce took him to this doll mender named Lucius Clark, who is kind of supposed to be probably the best doll mender in the area. And so, but there was a cost for that Bryce could not see Edward ever again. And so Edward Tulane was mended, put together again, cleaned and polished, dressed in an elegant suit, and placed on a high shelf for display. From this shelf, Edward could see the whole shop, Lucius Clark's workbench and the windows to the outside world and the door that the customers used to enter and leave. From this shelf, Edward saw Bryce open the door one day and stand in the threshold, the silver harmonica in his left hand flashing brilliantly and the sunlight flooding in through the windows. "Young sir," said Lucius, "I'm afraid that we made a deal." "Can I see him?" asked Bryce, and he wiped his hand across his nose, and the gesture filled Edward with a terrible feeling of love and loss. "I just want to look at him." Lucius Clark sighed. "You may look," he said. "You may look, and then you must go and not come back. I cannot have you in my shop every day mooning over what you have lost." "Yes, sir," said Bryce. Lucius sighed again. He got up from his workbench and went to Edward's shelf and picked him up and held him so that Bryce could see him. "Hey, Jingles," said Bryce. "You look good. The last time I seen you, you looked terrible. Your head was busted in and—" "He is put together again," said Lucius, "as I promised you he would be." Bryce nodded, and he wiped his hand across his nose. There's Lucius and there's Bryce. "Can I hold him?" he asked. "No," said Lucius. Bryce nodded again. "Tell him goodbye," said Lucius Clark. "He is repaired, he has been saved. Now you must tell him goodbye." "Goodbye," said Bryce. "Don't go," thought Edward. "I won't be able to bear it if you go." "And now you must leave," said Lucius Clark. "Yes, sir," said Bryce, but he stood without moving, looking at Edward. "Go," said Lucius Clark. "Go." "Please," thought Edward, "don't." Bryce turned. He walked to the door of the doll mender's shop. The door closed, the bell tinkled, and Edward was alone. Chapter 25. Technically, of course, he was not alone. Lucius Clark's shop was filled with dolls. Lady dolls and baby dolls, dolls with eyes that opened and closed, and dolls with painted-on eyes, dolls dressed as queens, and dolls wearing sailor suits. Edward had never cared for dolls. He found them annoying and self-centered, twittery and vain. This opinion was immediately reinforced by his first shelf-mate, a china doll with green glass eyes and red lips and dark brown hair. She was wearing a green satin dress that fell to her knees. "Who are you?" she said in a high-pitched voice when Edward was placed on the shelf next to her. "I am a rabbit," said Edward. The doll let out a small squeak. "You are in the wrong place," she said. "This is a shop for dolls, not rabbits." Edward said nothing. "Shoo," said the doll. "I would love to shoo," said Edward, "but it is obvious that I cannot." After a long silence, the doll said, "I hope you don't think that anyone is going to buy you." Edward again said nothing. "The people who come in here want dolls, not rabbits. They want baby dolls or elegant dolls, such as myself, dolls with pretty dresses, dolls with eyes that open and close." "I have no interest in being purchased," said Edward. The doll gasped. "You don't want somebody to buy you," she said. "You don't want to be owned by a little girl who loves you?" Sarah Ruth, Abilene, their names went through Edward's head like the notes of a sad, sweet song. "I have already been loved," said Edward. "I have been loved by a girl named Abilene. I have been loved by a fisherman and his wife and a hobo and his dog. I have been loved by a boy who played the harmonica and by a girl who died." "Don't talk to me about love," he said. "I have known love." The impassioned speech shut up Edward's shelfmate for a considerable amount of time. "Well," she said at last, "still, my point is that no one is going to buy you." They did not speak to each other again. The doll was sold 2 weeks later to a grandmother who was purchasing her for a grandchild. "Yes," she said to Lucius Clark, "that one right there, the one with the green dress. She is quite lovely." "Yes," said Lucius Clark, "she is, isn't she?" And he plucked the doll from the shelf. Goodbye and good riddance, thought Edward. The spot next to the rabbit stayed vacant for some time. Day after day the door opened and closed, letting in early morning sun or late afternoon light, lifting the hearts of the dolls inside, all of them thinking when the door swung wide that this time, the person entering the shop would be the one who wanted them. Edward was the lone contrarian. He prided himself on not hoping or not allowing his heart to lift inside of him. He prided himself on keeping his heart silent, immobile, closed tight. I am done with hope, thought Edward Tulane. And then one day at dusk, right before he closed the shop, Lucius Clark placed another doll on the shelf next to Edward. "There you are, milady. Meet the rabbit doll," said Lucius. The doll mender walked away, turning out the lights, one by one. In the gloom of the shop, Edward could see that the doll's head, like his, had been broken and repaired. Her face was in fact a web of cracks. She was wearing a baby bonnet. "How do you do?" she said in a high, thin voice. "I am pleased to make your acquaintance." "Hello," said Edward. "Have you been here long?" she asked. "Months and months," said Edward. "But I don't care. One place is the same as another to me." "Oh, not for me," said the doll. "I have lived 100 years, and in that time I've been in places that were heavenly and others that were horrid. After a time you learn that each place is different, and you become a different doll in each place too. Quite different." 100 years, said Edward. "I am old." The doll mender confirmed this. He said as he was mending me that I am at least 100 years old. Edward thought about everything that had happened to him in his short life. What kind of adventures would you have if you were in the world for a century? The old doll said, "I wonder who will come for me this time. Someone will come. Someone always comes. Who will it be?" "I don't care if anyone comes for me," said Edward. "But that's dreadful," said the old doll. "There's no point in going on if you feel that way, no point at all. You must be filled with expectancy. You must be awash in hope. You must wonder who will love you, whom you will love next." "I am done with being loved," Edward told her. "I am done with loving. It's too painful." "Pish," said the old doll. "Where is your courage?" "Somewhere else, I guess," said Edward. "You disappoint me," she said. "You disappoint me greatly. If you have no intention of loving or being loved, then the whole journey is pointless. You might as well leap from this shelf right now and let yourself shatter into a million pieces. Get it over with. Get it all over with now." "I would leap if I was able," said Edward. "Shall I push you?" said the old doll. "No, thank you," Edward told her. "Not that you could," he muttered to himself. "What's that?" "Nothing," said Edward. The dark in the doll shop was now complete. The old doll and Edward sat on the shelf and stared straight ahead. "You disappoint me," said the old doll. His words made Edward think of Pellegrina, of warthogs and princesses, of listening and love, of spells and curses. What if there was somebody waiting to love him? What if there was somebody whom he would love again? Was it possible? Edward felt his heart stir. "No," he told his heart, "not possible, not possible." In the morning, Lucius Clark came and unlocked the shop. "Good morning, my darlings," he called out to them. "Good morning, my lovelies." He pulled up the shades on the windows. He turned on the light over his tools. He switched the sign on the door to open. The first customer was a little girl with her father. "Are you looking for something special?" Lucius Clark said to them. "Yes," said the girl. "I am looking for a friend." Her father put her on his shoulders as they walked slowly around the shop. The girl studied each doll carefully. She looked Edward right in the eyes. She nodded at him. "Have you decided, Natalie?" the father asked. "Yes," she said. "I want the one in the baby bonnet." "Oh," said Lucius Clark. "You know that she is very old. She is an antique." "She needs me," said Natalie firmly. Next to Edward, the old doll let out a sigh. She seemed to sit up straighter. Lucius came and took her off the shelf and handed her to Natalie, and when they left, when the girl's father opened the door for his daughter and the old doll, a bright shaft of early morning light came flooding in, and Edward heard quite clearly, as if she were still sitting next to him, the old doll's voice. "Open your heart," she said gently. "Someone will come. Someone will come for you. But first you must open your heart." The door closed. The sunlight disappeared. Someone will come. Edward's heart stirred. He thought for the first time in a long time of the house on Egypt Street, and of Abilene winding his watch and then bending toward him and placing it on his left leg, saying, "I will come home to you." No, he told himself, don't believe it. Don't let yourself believe it. But it was too late. Someone will come for you. The China Rabbit's heart had begun, again, to open. So here he is all alone. chapter 27. Seasons passed, fall and winter and spring and summer. Leaves blew in through the open door of Lucius Clark's shop. Rain and the green, outrageous, hopeful light of spring. People came and went, grandmothers and doll collectors and little girls with their mothers. Edward Tulane waited. The seasons turned into years. Edward Tulane waited. He repeated the old doll's words over and over until they wore a smooth groove of hope in his brain. Someone will come. Someone will come for you. And the old doll was right. Someone did come. It was springtime. It was raining. There were dogwood blossoms on the flowers on the floor of Lucius Clark's shop. She was a small girl, maybe 5 years old, and while her mother struggled to close the blue umbrella, the little girl walked around the store, stopping and staring solemnly at each doll, and then moving on. When she came to Edward, she stood in front of him for what seemed like a long time. She looked at him, and he looked back at her. Someone will come, Edward said. Someone will come for me. The girl smiled, and then she stood on her tiptoes and took Edward off the shelf. She cradled him in her arms. She held him in that same ferocious, tender way Sarah Ruth had held him. Oh, thought Edward, I remember this. Madam, said Lucius Clark, could you please attend to your daughter? She is holding a very fragile, very precious, quite expensive doll. Maggie, said the woman. She looked up from the still open umbrella. What have you got? A rabbit, said Maggie. A what? Said the mother. A rabbit, said Maggie again. I want him. Remember, we're not buying anything today. We're looking only, said the woman. Madam, said Lucius Clark, please. The woman came and stood over Maggie. She looked down at Edward. The rabbit felt dizzy. He wondered for a minute if his head had cracked open again, if he was dreaming. Look, Mama, said Maggie. Look at him. I see him, said the woman. She dropped the umbrella. She put her hand on the locket that hung around her neck, and Edward saw then that it was not a locket at all. It was a watch. A pocket watch. It was his watch. Edward? Said Abilene. Yes, said Edward. Edward, she said again, certain this time. Yes, said Edward. Yes, yes, yes. It's me. Once there was a China rabbit who was loved by a little girl. The rabbit went on an ocean journey and fell overboard and was rescued by a fisherman. He was buried under garbage and unburied by a dog. He traveled for a long time with the hobos and worked for a short time as a scarecrow. Once there was a rabbit who loved a little girl and watched her die. The rabbit danced on the streets of Memphis. His head was broken open in a diner and was put together by a doll mender. And the rabbit swore that he would not make the mistake of loving again. Once there was a rabbit who danced in a garden in springtime with the daughter of the woman who had loved him at the beginning of his journey. The girl swung the rabbit as she danced in circles. Sometimes they went fast, the two of them, that it seemed as if they were flying. Sometimes it seemed as if they both had wings. Oh, marvelous once, there was a rabbit who found his way home. And that is the end of the miraculous journey of Edward Tulane. Thank you for listening.